Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi. Well, it is Cinco de Mayo, and of course, a lot of you are going to probably celebrate in your own unique ways. You might have some tacos, some margaritas, but what is the origin of Cinco de Mayo, and how is it celebrated here in the U.S., and how is it celebrated in Mexico and across the rest of the world? Joining us for a bit more about that, we're now joined by the Executive Director from Museo de las Americas here in Denver, Claudia Moran. Thanks for taking the time to join us here today.
Thanks for the invitation, Chris.
So, Claudia, I guess before we get into anything else, we'll get into the history of Cinco de Mayo, but I want to ask you specifically, how are you going to celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
I'm going to celebrate it here at Museo de las Americas. Tomorrow we have First Friday. Any Cinco de Mayo on First Friday. That is not very common, so we're very excited about that.
So yeah, Cinco de Mayo falling on a Friday here in 2023. Okay, so let's get into the background of Cinco de Mayo. That's the real reason we're excited to have you on here today to learn a bit more about this holiday. What is Cinco de Mayo? How did it originate?
Cinco de Mayo started in 1862, and it was when the Mexican government defeated the French army. The French army wanted to take over the Mexico City, and they decided that it was a good opportunity because Spain was already gone. We were an independent country, and that's when France saw the opportunity to come and conquer Mexico City. Then they arrived in 1862, and when they arrived in the city of Puebla, the Mexican, in this case the army, defeated the French army. And that was a very, very big celebration because, more than anything was the excitement that they had about, like taking over these new invaders, let's say, at that point. And they all were celebrating. Months later, the general who was leading the Mexican army died from an illness that he had back in those days, bad illness. So the Mexican army didn't have a general for a while, and at that point, the French government decided to come back and take over Mexico City again, and they did it. So they won the second encounter they had, and Mexico became like a French colony for a few years. But why are we celebrating Cinco de Mayo? Why is that important if Mexico ended up losing the second battle? And became, honestly, at that point, like another sort of colony, never official, but that happened. So we had an emperor in Mexico for a while. And why do we celebrate Cinco de Mayo? It was because at that point, more than anything, it was this excitement about being able to defeat an army. So it was very convoluted, the political situation in Mexico. And that being said, means that they were not very organized. And by that, they were pretty much ready to lose the first battle, but they won it. So that is more like it was this collective, excitement, but also pride of being able to defeat an army and protect your country. So Cinco de Mayo is more like a celebration for that first encounter and moment when Mexico won, and then that later on had a big connection with the United States. And you say, why a big connection with the United States? Because it was like 1865, like 3 years later, and the US government was supporting the Mexican army. And at that point, many things happened in Europe too at the same time, and that's when the French government decided to pretty much withdraw the army from Mexico and take it back to France. The United States was supporting Mexico at that point, and that really all this combination of historical moments really support that that collective effort and collaboration. And at that specific moment, Mexico became again an independent country. And nothing wrong happened to, really didn't go any further. things would have been very complicated if, if Mexico wouldn't have the support from the U.S. Army, but also because the Mexican had a lot of, energy in that moment to keep, defeating the French army, at the same time that, things were not going really well for France in Europe. So, combination of historical moments that all of them help to keep Mexico as an independent country. And I will say right now, that's the most important piece of celebration that we have.
We are now over 160 years after that. How has that tradition continued over such a long period of time?
In Mexico, it's very important. So annually, this is an annual celebration, and actually it's a holiday. But in Mexico, it's very ceremonial. So many different states, and in the Mexico City too, they reenact, almost like a theatrical situation where people don't forget what happened, and not only won't forget, but acknowledge, how the Mexican army was very brave, and it's just like to create this nationalism, be very proud of who we are as Mexicans, for example. But also, why do we celebrate so much in the United States? It's very different than in Mexico. In the United States, it's more like a celebratory event, where after, I will say, 1980s, there were many companies and campaigns around celebration, the Cinco de Mayo celebration, and I will say that really became a very different type of celebration than in Mexico. Although we Latinos in the United States love to celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and we are also very proud to see how many other citizens here will celebrate it, but it is very different from how we celebrate it in Mexico. Here is more like a festivity. It's more like, like how we can go out and be with friends. And I will say Mexico is completely different. It's pretty much they are like militaries and government doing very official celebration with, with probably you can have helicopters and you can have marching militaries in the main city and Zócalo, and so on and so forth. So, but both are important. Both ways to celebrate for a celebration are important. And right now, us is here at Museo, we like to acknowledge the importance. So now it's going to be a Friday, Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah, that's fun. I think having it on a Friday is, well, I'm sure some of the people that you mentioned here in America that are celebrating for maybe more of a festivity reason will appreciate it's on a Friday. So just to kind of clarify the difference between, in Mexico, it's more of a nationalistic military holiday which is it's a federal holiday there. Here in the U.S., it's a bit more of an informal, fun, go out with friends sort of thing. Question for you, since you're originally from Mexico, how do you feel about the fact that in the last 30, 40 years, you mentioned that so many Americans have taken to this holiday? Do you like that, or maybe is there a feeling that's been distorted a little bit? What's your feeling on that?
To me, it was amazing to learn about this celebration. I was confused at the beginning, but now I feel that I like to celebrate it here. I think it's very interesting how we celebrate it with a lot of festivities, and the weather is changing. So many things are aligning right now that for me is more like a fiesta, holiday fiesta here, but it's fun. We got opportunity to gather with friends. We have an opportunity to eat Mexican food. We have an opportunity to drink, traditional cocktails from Mexico, like margaritas or beer or anything. So, that's really what big brands try to do to promote Cinco de Mayo in the United States, and we acknowledge that too. No, so I will say that it is fun.
I know you've been in Denver for a long time. Any sort of celebrations here in Denver, across Colorado, that you've particularly taken to that you think are fun ways to celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
On Federal
Yeah.
Street, there is always like an annual celebration. It's almost like a parade. But we also have another celebration at Civic
Civic Center Park.
Civic Center Park. And other than that, well, celebration slash arts and culture here in Cinco de Mayo on Santa Fe Arts District. But restaurants and many other, like different spots from Mexicans where they gather, they will celebrate. So
that's fun. Oh. And could you get into more detail about what you are doing here at Museo de las Américas to celebrate Cinco de Mayo on Friday night?
We'll have Ballet Folclórico, Sangre de México. So we have a few performances from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. But we also will be, just welcoming people. There is no admission fee, so everyone can come for free to Museo. And I'm sure it's going to be a collective parade outside of the Museo, just from different people coming all over and celebrate Cinco de Mayo. So it's going to be a fun event and activity outdoors and indoors.
Oh, that's fun, and I'm sure that'll be a good time. It sounds like maybe a bit of a mix to me based on what you were describing about the Mexican way of celebrating Cinco de Mayo and the way it's celebrated here in the U.S. Sounds like you're celebrating kind of like a bit of a mixed way with a bit of festivity, but also a bit of history. Is that right?
Correct. Very important traditions like Ballet Folclórico, and that is important to just present it. So we'll be having a little bit of that tomorrow night.
Sounds very fun. And anything else you want to add about Cinco de Mayo, what it means to you and what you think of this holiday?
I like to celebrate Cinco de Mayo here in Denver, and I see an opportunity to go out and have Mexican food, and also to see lowriders. I love the lowriders. So we can go out and just check it out, the Civic Center Park, and that's going to be almost like a show there. So, there is many artistic activities happening, so I really enjoy that.
Oh, that's so great. Well, appreciate you, Claudia, for joining us here and giving us a bit of insight about what Cinco de Mayo is, what it means to you, and how you'll be celebrating. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Chris.